Hello. Hey.
Good morning.
Morning, Claire.
Here we go. How you doing?
Bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum bum. Bum ba dum ba dum bum bum. Bim, 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 bim. Have you had any coffee, Colin?
Oh yeah. Oh. Oh, skin there. Yeah. How you all doing?
Good, good. We have what,
Very
1
good,
minute to
thank you.
go? Are you keeping time, Hrefna?
Yes, we are. Yeah, 1 minute. We already have quite a few people arriving, so it's nice to
Okay.
see the Nordics are a timely bunch, looks like.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okie
8 o'clock.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with the Nordics. Icelanders and Irish this time. My name is 𝗖𝗢𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘. I'm the managing director for Iceland Music. Today, I'm very happy to introduce our new recruit, 𝗙𝗢𝗙𝗙𝗏 or Hrefna for Icelandic speakers, who's going to be speaking with two gentlemen today from a newly formed publishing company, the first of its kind in Iceland, called INNI Music. And these gentlemen are 𝗙𝗀𝗪𝗏, who actually is immigrated here from Ireland in 2014. He ran two labels here in Iceland for a while and then decided to start this very interesting new music company with Atli Örvarsson, composer and film composer and aficionado of music up north in Akureyri. Atli lives in Akureyri and works from there and has set up a very interesting studio there called Sinfonia Nord, which specializes in film music, as does Atli, who writes film music and music for film and television, mostly, as well as his own music, which he sort of releases secretly once in a while. Not so secretly anymore, since it's going to be released on INNI Music probably from here on. So welcome, gentlemen, welcome 𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗏, and welcome everyone else who's listening. I'm going to fade off into the background now and let you folks have a chat about all things film, music, and film for television and music. And that was good. Film for television and film.
It's very early.
Yes, it's too early for me. I haven't had more than 3 cups of coffee and spoken to Jesus this morning, but I'll fade off in the background. Can you zip me off?
I think I can.
Thanks.
Cheers, Siggy.
Cheers.
Remove. This feels a little bit offensive, but hopefully, oh no, that's a little bit aggressive. That will kick you out of the conversation. Here we are. Good morning. How are you?
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So it's 8 o'clock in Iceland for anyone joining from not Iceland. So that's why, hence the jokes about how early it is. How are you doing so early in the morning?
You know, pretty good. Usually up by this time anyway, and but usually not having to sort of have an intelligent conversation, or hopefully intelligent.
Yeah, we just got a message from Heather, who's calling in from Montreal, and it's 4 a.m. there. So that's real commitment. So we appreciate it, Heather.
So we'll stop whining about the time then.
Absolutely. So yeah, we are just so excited to start this conversation. The title is Music for TV and Film. And thank you, 𝗖𝗢𝗙𝗙𝗏, for the great introductions of the two of you who will be talking to, and maybe it's interesting because you seem to come from two different countries and two different places. Like, how did you end up meeting and how did your paths cross? Maybe it's an interesting point to start the conversation there, or maybe if you want to add a little bit more to the introduction Sigtryggur gave, maybe if we start with you, Colin.
Yeah. I got my start in music back when I was 16, and a band I was in were signed. We were quite young when we got signed, I guess, and we went off and toured, and I sort of became a session, guitarist for a bunch of bands, and I went on tour. And then about 7 years ago, I just kind of ended up in Iceland at a music festival. And yeah, I just fell in love with the place, and decided to kind of, spend a year here and see if I liked it. And then pretty soon after that, I started working at a label in the studio here. So I did that for about 4 years, and then kind of into that process, I just sort of saw like a kind of a niche for something like a publishing company here, because there wasn't any in Iceland. And around the same time, I think I bumped into you at the studio, Atli. I think you'd come to visit the studio I worked at. So we met just very briefly at that. And then I think it was Jóhann Jóhannsson's memorial, we bumped into each other again in INNI. And then I think a few days later, I think it was 𝗖𝗢𝗙𝗪 at INNI basically let us both know that we had a very similar idea and that we should probably talk to each other about it. So that was kind of how it began, I guess. And then, yeah, it's been two or 3 years. 3 years?
Nice.
Feels like an eternity, Atli.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly.
So 𝗖𝗢𝗙𝗪 is like your little matchmaker. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, 𝗖𝗢𝗙𝗪 is our Tinder.
Yeah, great. So what about you, Atli? What's your kind of journey to this moment in time?
Well, it all started. Well, let's see. I lived in Los Angeles for a very long time, working in film and television, and then about 5-6 years ago, I moved back to Iceland as an experiment, which of course is ongoing, and I'm still here. But I'd been out of the loop for a very long time in the Icelandic music industry and the music scene, and just was very shocked or pleasantly surprised, let's say, to find out the incredible amount of amazing musicians working and just the level of not just the talent, but the composition and the production, and just like this incredible thriving music scene. And so I started wondering if there was any way that I could use my connections and my knowledge to sort of help people maybe gain access to a bigger audience, and maybe build a bit of an infrastructure in the Icelandic music industry, which I think is and was lacking a little bit. So yeah, and then as Colin described, our path sort of came together, and we had the same idea, which is basically like, how do we promote some of this music? And to be honest, I have a pretty busy career, and sort of the last thing I needed was to start a publishing company, but at the same time, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I just believe in it so much. And I just think that, again, what Iceland has is just an abundance of talent, but it needed a bit of structure and a bit of sort of more, there's plenty of music, less industry. We need to sort of up the industry part a bit.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think it's really exciting to see the kind of industry side, because obviously no one doubts the talent in Iceland, but to see the industry side grow a little bit is really exciting to me from a personal and professional point as well. So I'm curious, because the title of the conversation is Music for TV and Film, and we're talking about this gap you saw in the market here in Iceland with a publishing company. Can we maybe talk a little bit, if someone is new to all the language around getting music into TV and film, like how does publishing, like how do those two things have anything to do with each other?
Well, I've always, not always, I sometimes say that a publishing company is a weird sort of combination of an accounting firm and a talent agency. So in other words, you know, part of its job is simply to kind of catalog and organize somebody's catalog, you know, like musical works, and then make sure they get paid for it. The other sort of, you know, big part of a publishing company is what I said, sort of being an agency. And you know, and so that's the idea, is that we can use our connections to pitch music that's on our roster and in our catalog for sync, whether it's TV, film, commercials, etc., etc. And you know, and it's not just the connections that Colm and I have, but also we have just signed a deal with Cobalt for worldwide, you know, sub-publishing. And they have a huge sync team, which this is what they do every day, is to try to find a match for songs in their catalog in, you know, whether in various sort of media productions.
That's really good. So what you're saying is that by making sure, if you're a composer, let's say, and you have all these songs, so if you have you're signed with a publishing company, you're basically just making sure all your work is available to someone who's looking for the music. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just pitching your songs, pitching your works, trying to get it out there, whether it's songs to different artists or songs for music supervisors who put it into film and TV, etc. It's just like, you know, it's like an agency for musical works.
That's really cool. And so what was it? So what was because you said you noticed this, that this wasn't really properly managed, or like it was just, we weren't all the way there in Iceland a few years ago when you identified that there was this gap for a publishing company, specifically because you were seeing interest from, you know, the big film productions to use Icelandic music. Can you talk a little bit about like what happens if we don't think about publishing as composers or artists?
Yeah, like I think for me, when I was working at the label, I'd have a lot of music supervisors that would contact me and say, okay, this is, you know, I saw this amazing band at 𝗪𝗏𝗧. How do I get in contact with them? I want to use a song. And then, you know, once you start getting that conversation started, a lot of the musicians and artists here didn't really realize a lot of the technical side of that and what that means and what the master side is and what publishing entails. And like, you know, like who wrote the song, like was it a cover? You know, there's all of these different things that you need to really know when you're putting a song in a film, because a music supervisor doesn't want to get a phone call, you know, 6 months later saying, actually, there's a sample from a Jay-Z song, you know, in this. And so they want to have someone who's quite reliable and knows this music, because they want to use it fast and they don't want any barriers to getting that song into a TV show or a film. So for me, it was just like I kept seeing all of these lost, you know, opportunities for bands that could break them, you know, trying to use the song and like just, you know, these things have to happen very quickly. You can't spend a month back and forth emailing about a song. It just has to be, this is the song, these are the people that own it, these are the people representing it, it's registered, everything is above board. So that for us, it was just building a catalog of music and you know, with artists who work here and making sure that when people come to use their music, that it's, you know, that we can negotiate a fee, we can make sure that everything's above board and that it can be done quick and fast. We have instrumentals, we have lyrics, all of those kind of things. So yeah, it was something that was just lacking, and I think it's just having that connect to Iceland and being able to maybe talk to artists and really tell them about why it's important and why they should do this, you know.
That's
And
really
I also,
good.
if I can jump in, I think, you know, publishing all these, you know, all these, the language of, you know, what is publishing, what is master, what is all these things, is very confusing for most people, I think. So I think it's important to kind of point out to people that there's an ownership in the music, and that's the publishing, like in the composition itself. And then there's an ownership in the recording, and that's what's called master. And sometimes there's a disconnect between the two. You know, you can get an agreed, you know, green light from the publisher that it's okay to use the music, but if the entity that owns the master doesn't agree, then none of it works. So having those two entities speak to each other and preferably just being under one roof, like we like to do, is such an asset, because then, you know, decisions about the use of the music can be made so quickly.
So by having all of the publishing just managed properly, it means that if somebody gets in touch and is like, hey, can I use the song for this TV show? It can just be signed off right away, and then there's no hold up on the kind of licensing side of it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I mean, obviously, you have to, you know, if clear with the artist, or if there is another label, we have to make sure everything's okay, and you know, so there is a little bit of dialogue, but it's, you know, we have a pretty, you know, we have a pretty clear system of how we do it, and you know, it can really vary from time to time.
Yeah, you know, let's just say that there's sort of this web of things. You know, there's the label, artist, publisher, you know, and all these people or these entities have to be on the same kind of in step with each other, and that's our goal. And that's maybe what we were saying about this sort of infrastructure lacking in Iceland before, was that it's, you know, like Colin was saying, somebody would say, I really want to use this song, and then people maybe wouldn't even know who the publisher was or who had the master, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is organize it, at least for our artists, so that there is no question marks. And if somebody wants to use it, it can be cleared within a day.
So there's clear documentation of ownership and any party involved, which makes just this the turnaround a lot quicker, and that's what creates opportunities for composers. So if anyone watching is maybe a composer themselves and is thinking like, okay, I've made all this music and I believe in it and it's great, but like how would they get started? Let's say they're watching and they haven't really thought of the publishing side, but they are interested, like maybe their music is what would fit a TV show. So what would you want to say to maybe that person? Like, what's a good thing to think about as an artist to get started, to maybe have these things in order on their side?
Do you want to take this, Colin, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think our artists should really, you know, try to understand and really research, you know, music copyright, and you know, if they do own their own recording, realize that that's a very valuable thing too. To, you know, if you made an album and you own the master side, you know, it means that you have full say over if it's used or not, and especially as well if they own their publishing, whatever it might be. But I think, like, you know, reaching out to music supervisors and really kind of researching what they do and what shows they work on. You know, if, you know, whatever genre of music you know that you make, you should look at who's, you know, what music supervisors are really in that kind of genre. So a lot of it's kind of research, I think, and just figuring out where your music lands and where it might work. And then also you can reach out to like a sync agent, who will, you know, represent catalogs and try and, you know, they'll have good, you know, relationships with certain music supervisors and directors and film companies. So they can be very helpful as well. But I think it's just, a lot of it's just, you know, doing your research and figuring out, you know, who is working on what, and just being very active, and also just like reaching out to your export offices, you know, because they're a very good resource and have really great existing relationships. So I think that's a very good start if you're just starting out, is to, you know, really look into it and have a dialogue with the export office.
Yeah.
Mary, then, oh, do you want to add something, Atli?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, this business or this industry is like a people industry, you know, and I think the sort of two real tracks that you have to think about. One is just, you know, being professional with, you know, trying to organize your catalog, you know, taking care of the publishing, taking care of the ownership, registering your work, all of that. But the other really important thing is to get to know people. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, you can write the greatest music in the world, but if you don't know somebody who can help you get it somewhere, it's gonna maybe not get anywhere, you know? So it's going to seminar, going to engaging in even something like this, and, you know, going out to meet people, at least after COVID, hopefully is done. I think is just the key, you know, it's about the people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We actually have here in the comments Christian, who is a music supervisor in Copenhagen, and he's offering his contact details. So I encourage anyone who's on the chat to jump into the chat, you know, anyone who's on the call, or even just on the Facebook event, if you want to add a comment about who you are, or maybe just your Instagram link or whatever, because I 100% agree. I think the music world is about who you know and building your connections. What I think is interesting is I feel like we've been talking about you already have music and you're trying to get it into TV shows and films, but I feel like that's one side of it, but there's also the other side of it where you're scoring the film, where you're creating the soundtrack for the film. Can you talk a little bit about what's the difference maybe between those two things? And are you working on both of those sides, or are you more focused on one or the other?
Well, you know, there's, you know, as a film composer of, I don't know how many years now, like, there's a big difference, you know. I mean, that's what my career has been, scoring TV and film. And so, which obviously means sort of writing the underscore, the music that sort of is a part of the drama. And I mean, to be actually a really good example to illustrate this is the film, the Eurovision film, the Will Ferrell film that came out last year, because I did the score for that. But at the point when I got involved writing the score, all the songs had been written, but at the same time, at the end of the film, it says music by Atli Örvarsson. So everybody assumes that I wrote '𝗖𝗙𝗙𝗃 and I'm so, you know, it's so disappointing to have to tell people that I didn't write 𝗖𝗙𝗃. It's just devastating, really. But anyway,
that is a landmark song. Yeah,
it is. It's an epic. But the point is, you know, anyway, that you know, there was a whole songwriting team on that film which wrote all these amazing songs. And then when I got involved, that was all done, you know, and it was just like my role was to work with the director to enhance, as I said, the action or emotion of the scenes. So it's a totally different sort of, it's like two sides of the coin, really. And you know, I mean, as it happens, a lot of the music that we sign is instrumental music that lends itself to possibly being used as underscore. But you know, it's if you're a songwriter, you know, it's like essential to either have a publisher or have an agent or know music supervisors, because those are the people who can get your songs into, you know, into media. And the scoring world is sort of a kind of a different track, you know, because, you know, that's basically custom building music for a whole film or TV show or something like that. And it's a discipline that takes a long time to learn. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this chat who are doing that or aspire to do it. But I mean, it's a bit, you know, it's like I said, it's sort of like two sides of the same coin, but it's quite different.
Yeah, Colin, do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, not everybody is a composer, like a film composer, obviously. And I think, you know, for someone like Atli who started, this is kind of his main thing. You know, it can be quite different. I think there's other opportunities maybe for as an artist, you know, who just writes tracks, like as an album of music in a certain genre. I think those people, you know, they may not necessarily do score music, but with our company, I mean, we have quite a few composers who also make albums, you know, which is kind of, I mean, it's kind of maybe not the norm, maybe, to have, you know, so many film composers who also make records. But I think that just speaks volumes of the talent in Iceland. You know, it's like we have writers that can, you know, get in a room and write songs with people, and they can also, you know, work on a documentary or a film, and then they can also release records as their, you know, their other name or whatever it might be. So, you know, it can be different for every artist, you know.
Yeah, and so I feel like the distinction here, I just want to make sure it's really clear for people listening. So I think there's like two things we're talking about here. There's like the score, which is what Atli does on like a world-class level, which is, you know, creating the atmosphere of the film. And then there is sync, which is like you're an artist and your specific song goes to a Netflix series or to a film or something. And do you find that more of your time is spent on the sync side, or maybe Colin,
Yeah, I
is the
mean,
question for you, because Atli, obviously your job, your profession is the scoring maybe more.
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, even for, say, you know, if Atli's scoring a film, sometimes maybe they'll be like, oh, you know, we really like this track from your album. Can we include that, you know, on the score? I think that happens quite a lot too. With a lot of composers, where they might have pre-existing music that the directors might like, or a track from their album that the director might like. I mean, it can just be anything really. You know, it's like I don't think any film is the same, you know, in terms of what they need. Sometimes they want a song written for the film, or, you know, so it's just kind of like no film is the same, you know. So it's yeah, but I mean, as a composer, it's like, say for instance, the Eurovision film is an example, actually. I mean, you know, you came in to score it, but there was also a music supervisor who was trying to clear tracks by Sigur Rós and you know, other Icelandic artists for that film, and that's their job, is just to make, you know, get those tracks in that film. And then, you know, Atli is basically taking care of the score, and then you had a team of songwriters who were writing the Eurovision songs. So it's like quite a big team involved, you know.
And do you find that people come to you and they're like, you know, I want this Sigur Rós song, or I want this, or I need something for the scene, or are you pitching specific songs? Like, what's the, or does it just happen different every time? Or do you find there's a lot of ongoing relationships where maybe just people are like, oh, I'm working on this film, do you have anything in mind for this? Like, what's the kind of day-to-day kind of relationship that you're working on, and like in relation to the film industry, like what does that relationship look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of pictures from music supervisors who will be, you know, I have an upcoming TV show or film, I need something with cellos that's, you know, a certain vibe, a certain atmosphere, and then I'll go through and see if I can find something that might work, you know. So that's just like the personal relationship stuff. And then we also have 𝗏𝗏𝗏, who have offices and a great sync team around the world, and they're just always, you know, pitching music for ads, for TV, for film. They're also, you know, working with writers and, you know, trying to get, you know, writers in the same room to work on songs for their big artists, you know. So it's, and a lot of it could be even creating music for a film or TV show, you know. There's just many different avenues, I think, and that's the thing as a publisher, is like we have to look at every single avenue we can find to generate more income for the artist. So that's kind of, it can come from anywhere really. Yeah.
I also, if I can add one thing, I think there's been a bit of a shift in this world in the last few years, where film directors are more and more sort of looking outside of the typical film composer pool to try to find artists, you know, that have a distinctive voice, rather than sort of get the film score sound, if you will. And which I think is a really interesting development. And I mean, you know, if you look at people like some of our biggest film composers in Iceland, like the late Jóhann Jóhannsson, Ólafur Arnalds, Hildur Guðnadóttir, you know, they all basically come from a career of making their own music away from film, and then sort of get handpicked to sort of like, oh, I really love this album, I'd love to have something like this in my film. And then they sort of need to sort of learn the nuts and bolts of scoring a movie after the fact. So typically in the old days, you know, you sort of had to go to music conservatory to learn how to write music on paper, because it was mostly symphonic, and it was sort of like it was a discipline, and it still is, obviously, to write film music. But increasingly, I feel like filmmakers are actually looking for artists to score their films, which creates opportunities and problems because, you know, it's not as easy as it looks, even though you may have the greatest music, but scoring the film can be a very different sort of kettle of fish. But there's definitely sort of that, which is why I tell people to just write your own music, because, you know, we don't need another John Williams or Ennio Morricone or Hans Zimmer. They're already there. Just write your own music, because that's, at the end of the day, is what's going to get you to a place where you're supposed to be, which is being yourself.
Wow, that's a really great answer. I actually noted down a question I wanted to kind of maybe talk a little bit more about, which is like, what can I as an artist, if I'm a composer, if I'm in a band or whatever, what could I do to prepare? But I feel like you've kind of already answered that by saying, if you have your own sound, if you're really true to who you are and you're executing your vision, like, is that how you get noticed in the scene, by just being true to who you are? Or is there anything I could do to prepare to be noticed in this context if I was, you know, as a composer or as an artist?
Well, the handbook hasn't been written yet. And I mean, I'm joking about it, but I couldn't be more serious, because it's such an unpredictable path, and everybody's path is different. It's not like becoming a doctor where you do your residency and then you go and become a doctor. It's like there's no way to plan or predict how this is going to go down. But so, I mean, I think it's being persistent with, and not taking no personally. That's an incredibly important thing, because it just takes so much rejection to get one no, and musicians are sensitive people, so it's like getting all this rejection can be pretty difficult. But I mean, it's I mean, to get noticed, I don't know, I have no idea how you get noticed. It's like, like, you try to meet the right people, try to write the best music you can, and the rest is up to something else.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Colm?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for people who want to get into film score, I think like starting by like, reaching out to up and coming directors and offering maybe to work with them, and building those relationships, and just getting the experience of actually doing it. Because it's a very, it's a tough job. It's a really, really tough job, and it takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of time in the studio, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of communications. There's just so many elements to it. So I feel like just getting started is just, work on something, try and take something from a film and try and create your own score to it, and just, build it that way. Because I think as well, like, having a reel is important, as a young composer, and, like, what have you done, what have you worked on? And I think it's just like anything, you really need to put the hours in, and try and find some, a composer in your city that maybe you could, intern for a while and pick up some skills, and, and I think that's, that's kind of how it's worked for most people,
Yeah. So speaking of that, I feel like the undertone of this conversation is like, Atli, you obviously worked in Hollywood and you've worked with, listing your CV would take the rest of our time. But can you talk maybe a little bit about how you got there, or what was it like to work there, and maybe in contrast to what it's like to be back in Iceland? You said it was like an experiment to be in Iceland. Is there a difference? Are you still just working? We all live in the era of remote work. Are you just working on what you were doing there, but you're doing it from Iceland? Can you maybe go a little bit into that side of things for people who might not know that journey a little bit more?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said before, I lived in LA for almost 20 years. And one day, not so long ago, I realized that I hadn't seen any of the producers that I was working with for months. And I thought to myself, it honestly wouldn't make any difference where I am as long as I have the internet, because basically, I compose the music, I print, mix, and I send it to the director or the producer, whoever, over Dropbox or some other way of, sending it over the internet. And, anybody who's been to LA knows that you don't want to drive to go see somebody if you can avoid it. So people just like, it's such a time waste to get in the car and go see somebody when you can do Zoom. Of course, there are times, when let's say you're starting to work on a film with a director, you need to be in the same room, in my opinion. Or preferably you want to be, just because we do communicate a lot with body language and unspoken things, so it's better to be in the same room. But no, I mean, I think that's kind of, let's put it this way. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to continue my Hollywood career from Akureyri, that's for sure. And the funny thing is that my career in LA has actually sort of expanded since I moved back rather than anything else. Because, and I don't know, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's just like how, some people say you just have to be there for 20 years to get your career off the ground. And at least back in the day when I moved there, basically, if you wanted to be a film composer in Hollywood, you had to move to Hollywood. But again, I think that has changed, and I think, if you think about, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I was thinking about the people who were nominated for Best Music for a movie at the Oscars. It was like Alexander Desplat, who was from Paris and lives in Paris. Johan, who was living in Berlin at the time. Dario Marianelli, who's Italian, lives in London. I mean, almost the majority of the composers who were nominated, at least that year, happened to be living outside of the United States. So I do believe that the geography has definitely changed. But what hasn't changed is getting to know people, and I think that's I think, I think for the majority of people it still matters, unless you get extremely lucky and somebody notices your music. I think it is important to go out and meet people.
So when you were starting, so there was a lot of going to events and meeting people, and you built up your career very much that way with just networks and.
No, to be honest, I was really lucky. I jumped right into working with people at the top of the industry. My first boss was this guy called Mike Post, who was a legendary TV composer in LA, and and I worked for him for about 5 years. Then I went out my own for 2 years, and after that I started working with Hans Zimmer. And so basically having these two guys as my mentors was kind of like the that I was about as lucky as you can be, or fortunate, or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, the way that all happened is that I sent my music into this sort of it was like this internship, or actually it was called a fellowship with BMI in the United States, to go and work with Mike Post and sort of just learn from him. And my music got like I was one of the 3 people chosen the year that I sent it in, and I can pretty much trace every single job that I got since then to being in that room with him and getting to know the people in his circle. So I guess I sort of skipped the part where you have to go and chase people down a lot, although that's not quite true, because there was like a 2-year period when I didn't really have a solid gig in LA. And yeah, it was just like trying to meet every single human being you could think of in the industry, and and then taking whatever odd jobs you could to have something to eat in between. And I mean it's like it was amazing. I mean, like, looking back and sort of not having anything to do was really, it sort of builds character, if you will, and it makes you just realize how you have to really want to do it to keep going. And I mean, there were times when I thought about giving up, but I never did. And so I think persistence again is the word that comes to my mind. You have to really want to do this. So I don't know if this answers your question in a roundabout way, but at least my path was to go out there, meet people, and learn from the masters of the craft.
Yeah, and now you're working with a lot of the local people in Iceland. That's correct, or?
I am, and it's in a way, it's like that has been amazing to get sort of a new injection of sounds and ideas into my own music, which Icelandic music happens to just be incredibly hip and in and
Yeah.
and really good, to be honest, at the moment. So like it's kind of, from a musical standpoint, I feel like it's in many ways been an upgrade to move to Iceland. And we also have developed this orchestra here in Iceland called Sinfonia Nord, where like I'm recording most of my music here now, as opposed to London or LA, and so that's been kind of another unexpected sort of benefit to coming back home. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I think this is a more global sort of industry than it's ever been before, and there's more opportunities than there's ever been before.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. Colin, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, yeah, you have a good story, Atli, in fairness. But I think as well, it's like what's interesting to say about having Atli, you know, with this company is sort of there has been a lot of mentoring of the artists we're working with who have been doing this and have kind of some of them have built, you know, a pretty good career working in film and TV, and I think having somebody that you can kind of learn from to take you to the next level is very important. And I think that's something that we're really trying to work on as well, is like to build something in Reykjavik, have the industry here, have a lot of film composers working on films here, as against to going to LA or going to Berlin or wherever it might be. And I think it will just feed and grow, and it'll create more opportunities for composers here to actually understudy or, you know, learn from the people who are actually doing it. And I think that's kind of our goal here, is to build a kind of a community where people can, you know, knock on our door and ask questions and get advice and try and find that connect to the outside world a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel what you're bringing to Iceland, you know, very nice, is because you're saying that the industry side was maybe not as developed as also Colm, you were from Ireland, right? But you were also living in London, right?
I was in many places. Yeah, quite a few
trying
places.
to remember.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, same thing in Ireland. It's quite similar. You know, it's like when you're in a band, and I lived in the countryside in the middle of nowhere for, you know, until I was 18. For me, there was nowhere to go. There was no music in my school. There was nothing in my town. So I had to kind of leave and try and find it, you know, and try and find people with similar interests in music. And that's kind of what led me here. It has a very similar Ireland vibe to it. But the thing about here is that it's just that there's so much kind of, I don't know, something very genuine about the sound here. I think people make music here because they want to make music, and they don't do it because they want to get rich or super famous. It's just a very pure kind of way that people approach music. And then so much music gets made, but it's always somehow it sort of gets kind of stuck where it is. And I think a lot of musicians really want to take it to the next level, and they want to build careers, and they want to make, you know, be able to pay the bills and do this full time, and look at all the opportunities that they can find to do that, and write songs for people and get their music in film, or, you know, score films, you know. So yeah, I think it's just we're very lucky to be in Reykjavik and be able to, you know, do this, you know. But you know, it's been you know 2 years, and I think there's just been it's great to see some of our artists grow and have full-time careers, you know, working. We have a composer that we started working with 2 years ago, and he's doing a big documentary for HBO, and he's been working on a bunch of films, and you know, it's really inspiring to see that he's hit that level, you know.
That's so,
yeah.
I feel like there's such a perfect relationship here between making film music and being in Iceland, because a lot of the other avenues for artists is to go touring or to go, you know, interact in that way. But I feel like there's something about all this film music, all this atmospheric music being created in Iceland that just like really fits. And it's so nice to see that like they're getting supported more from an industry perspective, because yeah, you don't want all that amazing art to just disappear in someone's drawer. And so it's really, really nice. And so just from like a practical, like standard, like what do you see from the industry side that like could be really practical for someone to maybe just take on? Is it just to make sure they know who wrote the song and have all that documented, or what's like a super practical step someone could take who's listening right now?
I think you know, when you send a big WAV file, I think it's the number one thing to not do. Like if anyone sends me a huge file, I will not listen to it, because like it's not practical for me. But there's a really great site called 𝗪𝗏𝗪, and it's a great place to like put your music in, tag it, you know, to genre, to BPM, and it's just a really great tool to be able to share your music. And you can, a lot of music supervisors use this because, you know, they don't want all these files on their hard drive, but they have this kind of in the cloud system. So that's a really practical way. Like anytime I send, you know, when you send a link like that to a music supervisor, they're instantly like, thank you very much. You know, you're basically trying to make their life as easy as possible. And I think just like writing out your lyrics, having instrumentals of your songs, having it, you know, who wrote the song, having the splits correct, making sure you know, if you sign with the label, knowing, you know, what the deal is on the master side. So if you do get a sync, you know what percentage the label get from that. You know, there's just like very practical things that, you know, you need to do before you even reach out to a music supervisor. You know, you want to make things as easy as possible, and that's what I would, you know, when a band come to me and they're very well prepared, it makes everything easy, and you want to work with that person because it's, you know, they've done their research, they know what they need to do, you know, they're determined and they want it to happen, and I think that's the best thing you can really do as an upcoming artist.
So if any artist would want to reach out to either of you directly, that's how to impress. That's how to impress you. To be,
Yeah.
you know, even if you don't have all the answers, but at least have kind of done your homework a little bit and made attempts at least to get things in order a little bit. I'm seeing some interesting conversations here in the chat. It's 𝗙𝗏𝗪 was the link we got asked. I wonder if anyone has any other questions in the chat. We're keeping a close eye on there, just throwing that out to the people watching. I've also seen people put in their Instagram links and their LinkedIn links. So I just want to give a huge kudos for being proactive about that. That's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. Is there anything you feel like we haven't covered, or you want to add, or you want to talk about?
I've been thinking about sort of, you know, how does one make a living as a musician nowadays? And, you know, we all know that the landscape has changed drastically with streaming as versus, you know, actually selling physical copies. Although it seems like, you know, a lot of the people coming up now didn't even grow up with that as a reality, so they don't even know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, you know, it's gotten the path to making a living as a musician has gotten narrower, and a lot of people want to get into scoring film and TV because it's one of the few places still where you sort of get paid without going on the road and selling t-shirts, you know. So, and I think that's just something for people to keep in mind. It's like, you know, there is more and more opportunity, but it's also getting increasingly competitive. So, and I sometimes get emails or requests from people who sort of to say, you know, I want to get my music into film and TV. I'm like, you know, get in line or join the club, because everybody does, and which is a good thing. You know, I mean, and it's like, but I think people need to be slightly realistic about that. It's no easier than getting a record deal or getting, you know, a million plays on Spotify or anything like that. It's actually possibly even more difficult. So I think it's just like, I don't want to be the, you know, the jaded, you know, veteran who says it's impossible. But I think it's important for people to be realistic about it, that it is extremely competitive, and everybody and their uncle wants to get into it, you know?
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Colm?
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of work. You really, you know, you really have to want it to do well. I mean, you just have to look at every avenue. You know, some writers might, you know, maybe their music doesn't get into film or TV, but maybe they're great songwriters. So maybe they should think about just writing songs and approaching publishing companies saying, look, I have these songs I've written, I'd love someone else to do them. There's just like lots of different avenues, and, you know, not one thing fits everybody, but it's important to know the avenues that are available to you, you know? You know, it's a big thing in LA, the kind of co-writing culture of, you know, getting in and meeting other writers, writing with them and collaborating on songs. And, you know, and that's another great avenue for people. So I think it's just figuring out what your strengths are and where you're sort of, you know, where your music is appreciated and what, you know, what makes you unique, I think is kind of what you need to really work at.
Yeah, maybe identifying like what is your core strength, like you said, if it is the songwriting,
Yeah.
Like there are career, I feel like for people who don't know, my context is I've been coming from London, like people are, you know, professional songwriters and that's what they do. They don't necessarily have a singer-songwriter performance career, they go for that. And then it's the same for the film side. We're getting some great questions in here. We have 11 minutes till 9 o'clock. I wonder if we should do some questions we've been getting in the chat, if you're ready.
Yeah.
First question here is from Heather in Montreal, who's very articulate for how early it is in the morning for her. So I'm very impressed about that. And she asks, where did you learn to orchestrate? Did you learn it in school or was this something you picked up in your career from your mentors?
Well, I originally started learning orchestration when I was playing in an orchestra as a kid, because I think that's how you really sort of start. Like, I notice a big difference between someone like myself who has played in an orchestra and a lot of other composers who have never done it and basically start writing with samples, because you simply write different music when you're thinking about a real musician and samples. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, no, I mean, I started studying orchestration sort of seriously when I went to college. I went to Berklee College of Music, and I did my master's degree at the University of North Carolina. But as with everything else, you really actually start learning when you leave school and start having to do it for real. Like, school is the beginning of learning. I think people have a misconception about school. It's like, I'll go to school and when I'm done, I know everything. Like, no, you go to school to realize that you don't really know anything. And when you come out into the real world, that's when you actually really start learning. So, I mean, possibly my work with Hans Zimmer was the biggest sort of education in orchestration, because not only did I have to sort of sink or swim, but you actually then 2 days later get to hear what you've done with a real, 100-piece orchestra. So,
Wow.
it's a long-winded answer, but it's like, I'm still learning how to orchestrate, and I think I will be learning it for the rest of my life. But there are really good resources online. You can do a course at Berklee online, and there's some great books out there, to be honest, to learn how to orchestrate. But as I said, that's just the beginning.
Amazing. Okay, we have a few more questions. Let's see if we can get through more of them. Katarina I'm just going to read her question. Would you have any more tips for people working in companies or publishing in this field for how to help the talent develop and find great projects? I think that's a really good question. So I think if I could just reframe it a little bit, this is for more the industry side. So if you're the publishing person and you're working with the artist or with the talent, how can you kind of bring out their best side? Like, and maybe it's interesting for both of you to answer from different perspectives. What's, like, Atli, for you, like, what's something you look for in people you're working with? And Colin also, I think it'll be interesting to hear what you have to say about this as well.
Well, if I go back to Hans Zimmer, and because we would have this conversation all the time, like, he gets 100 submissions every week from young composers, and 90% of them sound like John Williams, or it did back then. I don't know who they sound like now, but so I would say, be original and be yourself is the most important thing, because as I said before, you don't need another Hans or another, John. We need whoever they are. And so but I mean, obviously it's easy to say, because, there is a marketplace also for trailers and production music and stuff like that when you're getting started in a certain style. But I think, the most important thing is to develop something original, different, and try to figure out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, tips for people working in companies publishing in this field for how to help the talent to develop like projects. I think there's a lot of like, I mean, everyone's in the same boat. You know, we all want to, you know, do the best for artists and, you know, look at every avenue for them to do well. I think for us, I mean, we've done the which has always been really helpful is the trip we do this annual trip to LA with a lot of Nordic publishing companies, and that's kind of where this whole thing sort of developed in a way. I think it's good to have dialogue with other publishing companies and writers and to see what they're working on and if they want to write with artists in Iceland or whatnot. So I think it's just like same thing. It's just sort of reaching out and looking at who's upcoming, who's making great music, and trying to kind of maybe collaborate on that. Like we have, even in the last few months, we've had a lot of artists that have come to Iceland to work with people that we represent, because they're looking for something a bit different, or they just want someone to write with. And I think, a lot of it is just collaboration and meeting and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I feel like, your school is very to be in conversation with other people, and I think that works on every level. If you're an artist, talk to other artists, and also to the industry, and if you're industry, pay attention to what's coming up, and also look up to your the idols, and also learn and be proactive. I think that's very much like what the people who I know are successful, I feel like they all follow this ethos of working, so that's really nice. Yeah. And then I wonder if we have answered the question. Yeah, just to be really proactive. And and then to your point, Atli, about for the artists themselves to be original, I feel like, for those Icelandic artists we've seen who are very prominent, I feel like they all have their own distinct sound and voice. We mentioned Hildur Guðnadóttir and 𝗪𝗲𝗏. These are people who, like, they have such a strong identity, and even if they're working on different projects, like their personality kind of comes through if you're listening for it. So I think those two are really great points. So I'm just gonna, we have 4 minutes left, so I'm just gonna mark that answer as done. The other thing is a question from Baldvin, who asks, is there any particular screen scoring program you've noticed to be graduating successful students lately? So this is a question maybe about like I think just to build on this question a little bit is, do you find there's like specific pockets of communities that are interesting at any given moment, or do you find there's a difference between people who are maybe self-taught or that are educated? Maybe it's hard for the scoring world to be self-taught because it's so technical. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit about the kind of background, like where people come from, general, from the industry?
If I understand his questions correctly, I think he means a specific scoring program at a university level or a music school. And to address that, Berklee College of Music graduates tons of people every year who come out to LA or sort of spread around the world. In fact, one of my assistants here in Iceland graduated from Berklee in Valencia, Spain. And, I think there's a certain advantage people have coming out of these programs because they've already been taught sort of the basics on the technological aspect of things. Again, same as with orchestration, it's only the beginning of the education, but at least you have a base to build on. So Berklee obviously has a great track record. I went there myself. The USC, the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, has a brilliant film scoring program. To be honest, I don't really know the programs in Europe as well, but I know that London and the Royal College of Music even, I think, has a film scoring program, which at least has amazing mentors, and a lot of great composers are coming out of there. So I think, I think the only danger with a place like Berklee is that I find that people there tend to maybe be a bit more, like their reels are more generic than people who have just been sitting at a conservatory somewhere else and just come a little bit more out of the blue. So there's pros and cons, but you can certainly learn the basics in these programs. And USC has an incredible record of getting people working in the industry. So those are good places.
Amazing. I feel like I don't want to go over because I'm sure a lot of people have calls at 9 or have to start their workday. So I think, is there anything you want to add, either of you?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be respectful of everyone's time and not, you know, run over. So we've had a lot of people attending, which has been really nice. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined us. It's been great chat happening, great questions, and just again want to applaud everyone who's using the opportunity to connect with each other. I feel like that's been the message all along, is just be proactive and work hard and be nice to people. I think that's also a really important one. And I also just want to say it's just such an honor to talk to the both of you. And we from Iceland Music just really appreciate your time and your generosity and all your advice and everything, all the good stuff. Yeah, should we invite 𝗙𝗪𝗏 back in to see if he has any final words? All right, let's see if 𝗙𝗪𝗏 is back. Hi, 𝗙𝗪𝗏, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
There we go.
Thank you. No, I have no famous last words. Just very entertaining and illuminating at the same time. You can't expect more.
All right, and also thank you to NOMEX who are kind of behind all this. So yeah, see you all on the internet, I guess.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.